He was a baron, noble and admired, a man who had everything except a heart that knew how to love. For 32 years, he had remained untouched by romance, a solitary, respected figure in his grand estate. She was his oldest friend, the one person he trusted above all others, a woman who had spent a lifetime loving him in complete and aching silence. He believed he was finally ready to build a future, completely unaware he was about to ask the one woman who truly owned his heart to help him give it away to another. She thought she knew the depths of heartbreak, never dreaming he would ask her to become the architect of her own sorrow. But this is not just a story of unrequited love. It is the story of a man blind to the greatest treasure of his life. It's about the agonizing lessons in a firelit library and on a moonlit terrace, where a woman must use the secret language of her own soul to teach the man she adores how to be the perfect suitor for someone else. Stay with us, because this story will prove that the greatest love isn't always a grand, fiery passion, but a quiet, steady flame you've been warming your hands by your entire life. Comment with a heart if you've ever had a friend you wished was something more. And don't forget to subscribe. Prepare for a story that asks the ultimate question. What happens when the only person who can teach you how to truly love is the one you are about to lose forever? For 32 years, Baron Edward Montgomery of Ashbourne Park had never once truly seen a woman. Not once. He was admired, respected, and endlessly speculated about in the grand drawing rooms of London. His estate was a verdant jewel, nestled in the rolling green hills of the English countryside, a world unto itself. Some whispered he was too proud, others too fastidious. Some even claimed, in the most hushed and scandalous of tones, that his heart was as wild and untouchable as the windswept moors. But Cecilia knew the truth. At 28, she had been his closest companion for her entire life. She was not a ward or a distant cousin, but an equal, the daughter of Baron Ashworth, whose sprawling pastures and fields bordered his own ancient woods and streams. Their fathers, the closest of friends, had raised them almost as siblings. Ashbourne Park was as much a home to her as her own Ashworth Manor. Its sprawling gardens, her childhood playgrounds, its library, her sanctuary from the world. She had walked beside Edward through childhood mischief, chasing rabbits through the meadows. She had stood with him through the heavy mantle of his inheritance, a silent support in the cool, damp churchyard. And she had remained by his side through the lonely years of his duty to the land and its people. And she had loved him, silently, desperately, through all of it. So when he leaned forward in the fire-lit hush of the library, the scent of old leather, beeswax, and the damp earth after a sudden summer shower clinging to the air, and said, his voice almost reverent, "There is a lady I wish to win, and I need your help." Her world, a thing she had so carefully constructed around him, cracked clean in two. She smiled, because that was what she had always done for him. A small, polite, devastatingly false smile. She promised she would help him win another, when she had loved him all along. The lady in question was Lady Isabella Cresswell, recently arrived in the county from London. Cecilia had seen her at the last assembly ball. She was undeniably beautiful. A pale English rose, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes the shade of a summer sky. She moved with a practiced grace, her laughter a carefully orchestrated melody that drew the attention of every gentleman in the room. Edward, who had always stood at the peripheries of such events, had watched her captivated. Cecilia had watched him watch her, and had felt the first, cold premonition of this very moment. She had also noticed, with a sinking heart, what Edward had missed. Lady Isabella's dazzling smile was brightest when speaking to the Duke. Her attentive gaze was sharpest when a wealthy landowner spoke of his acquisitions. When Edward had finally been introduced, Cecilia saw Isabella's eyes flicker for a moment over his modest country attire, before landing on the heavy signet ring of the Montgomery family on his finger. Her interest, once secured, was radiant. She had listened to him speak of his duties to Ashbourne, her expression a perfect portrait of genteel fascination. But when he'd tried to share a small, heartfelt story about one of his tenants, her eyes had glazed over for a fraction of a second, her gaze sweeping the room for more important company. Edward, earnest and unpracticed in these games, had seen only her beauty and charm. Cecilia had seen the cold, hard gleam of ambition. Now, in the library, he spoke of Isabella with a kind of hopeful reverence she had never heard from him before. He described her grace, her wit, her refined London sensibilities. He sounded like a scholar describing a work of art, admiring it from a distance, unsure of how to approach. He was a man of land, of ledgers, of quiet honor. He did not know the language of flirtation, of gilded words designed to win a heart, and so he turned to the one person who had always been his translator for the world. He paced the room, restless, before stopping at the shelves near her chair. He reached for a book on a high shelf, his arm brushing against her shoulder. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent a bolt of heat through her, a familiar current she had spent a lifetime learning to ignore. He pulled the book down, but his fingers fumbled, and the heavy volume slipped, tumbling towards her. Instinctively, he moved faster than she thought possible. His other hand shot out, catching the book just inches from her head, his body lurching forward to shield her. For a split second, they were frozen. His face was inches from hers, his arm a protective barrier around her. She could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, feel the warmth radiating from his chest. The world narrowed to the space between them, a space suddenly charged with an unspoken, magnetic energy. Her breath caught in her throat. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise in their depths. As if seeing her for the first time, the air crackled. This was it. Her heart screamed. See me. Please, just once. See me. He held the gaze for a heartbeat longer, a silent question hanging between them. Then the moment shattered. He blinked, a faint flush rising on his cheeks, and straightened up, pulling away as if burned. He cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "My apologies," he said, his voice a little too loud in the quiet room. "Clumsy of me." He placed the book on a nearby table, his movements stiff. He brushed it off, resetting the world to its comfortable, platonic axis. For him, the moment was an accident, a near fall, nothing more. For Cecilia, it was a glimpse of a heaven she could never have, and the casual dismissal was a new, sharper kind of pain. He turned back to her, oblivious, his mind already returning to his original problem. He clasped his hands, the firelight catching the earnest plea in his eyes. He saw none of her turmoil, only his trusted friend, his steadfast Cecilia, his guide. "But that's just it," he said, his voice low and urgent, the charged moment utterly forgotten. "She sees the Baron. I want her to see the man." He looked at her, his soul bare and open in his gaze, and delivered the final, devastating blow. "Teach me, Cecilia, teach me how to make her see me." Her carefully constructed composure, held by a single, fraying thread. The smile she gave him was a masterpiece of deception, a fragile, beautiful thing, painted over the ruins of her heart. She could not breathe, could not think, could only nod. For what else could she do? To refuse was to reveal a truth he had never once looked for, a truth that would shatter the simple, perfect world of their friendship forever. And so she chose the slower, more private death. She chose to help him. The lessons began in the muted light of the following days, each one a fresh exercise in exquisite torture for Cecilia. They started in the library, the very heart of their friendship, which now felt like a room of betrayal. The subject was letters. Edward, a man whose correspondence on estate matters was a model of clarity and precision, was utterly lost when it came to crafting a romantic overture. His first draft was stiff, formal, reading more like a land deed than a letter of admiration. "It lacks warmth, Edward," Cecilia said gently, the parchment feeling heavy and foreign in her hands. Outside the open windows, A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the great oaks, a peaceful sound that was a cruel counterpoint to the turmoil within her. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. A gesture she knew so well, it physically hurt to see it done for another woman. Warmth? Cecilia, I'm a landowner and a magistrate. I know crop yields and tenant disputes. What does one even say? It was on the tip of her tongue to say, tell her about the way you stopped to listen to the old tales of Mrs. Higgins in the village, or the way your voice softens when you speak of your late mother's rose garden. Tell her about the boy you are beneath the barren. But those were the parts of him that belonged to her, the quiet, tender truths she had gathered and cherished over a lifetime. To offer them up to be packaged for Isabella felt like giving away the crown jewels. Instead, she guided him toward a language that was honest but less intimate. Speak of the things you love, she suggested, her voice carefully neutral. Describe what it feels like to stand on the North Ridge at dawn, when the mist is rising from the valley. That is a part of you. Cecilia's heart ached at the hollowness of his words. Admiration is for art in a gallery. Love is something else. She leaned forward slightly, her voice barely a whisper. Does she make you feel understood? When you are with her, does the world seem quieter? He had no answer. The questions probed a depth he had never considered, a language he did not speak. His interactions with Isabella were a flurry of anxiety, of performance, of choosing the right words. Quiet was the last thing he felt. In his confusion, his absolute trust in her wisdom made him do the most devastating thing possible. He turned the question back on her. I don't know, he admitted, his frustration mounting. He looked at her earnestly, his gaze open and seeking. How is it supposed to feel, Cecilia, truly? It took everything in her not to shatter. She had to turn away from him, her gaze finding the flickering flames in the hearth, a focal point to keep the tears from spilling from her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and thick with an emotion he mistook for profound wisdom. It is not a performance, she began, her voice low and steady. It is a quietness, a feeling of safety. It's knowing that you can be silent in a room with someone and still feel utterly and completely seen. It is a feeling of coming home, even when you have not been away. Love is not about chasing, Edward. It is about finding the one person you no longer have to run from or for. It is comfort. He was mesmerized by her words, by the profound sincerity in her voice. The description was so clear, so simple, yet it felt like a truth he had never known. For the first time, a seed of doubt was planted. He thought of his stilted, anxious conversations with Isabella. He thought of the constant feeling that he was playing a part. He realized, with a flicker of deep unease, that his feelings for Isabella shared nothing in common with Cecilia's beautiful, profound description. He brushed it off, for now. She had always been a romantic, a reader of poetry. He would achieve this feeling with Isabella in time, but the comparison had been made. The question would linger in his mind, a quiet dissonance that was impossible to ignore. Next came the waltz. They practiced in the gentle twilight on the grand stone terrace, the air fragrant with the scent of honeysuckle from the gardens below. As the music drifted from the house, he took her in his arms. The initial clumsiness gave way to a familiar, easy rhythm. He moved with a confidence he did not feel with anyone else. The comfort she had just described, he was soaking in it, blind to its source. He pulled her a fraction closer, the heat of his body a solid, undeniable presence. It is easier with you, he murmured, his gaze dropping to meet hers. The world stopped. It was that magnetic pull again, but this time it was layered with his new confusion. He was feeling that quietness she spoke of, that feeling of being seen. The question was there in his eyes. Then, as before, he broke the spell, pulling away as if the intimacy burned him. I can only hope I managed to lead Lady Isabella half as well. The knife twisted. sharper this time because he was now armed with the words to know what he was throwing away, even if he didn't understand it yet. The night before the gala, he found her on that same terrace. He was more nervous than she had ever seen him. "It all feels like a performance," he admitted, looking out at the dark hills. He turned to her, the vulnerability in his eyes a physical blow to her heart. "I keep thinking of what you said, about comfort, about being seen. I am not sure I know how to achieve that." "You cannot achieve it, Edward," she said softly. "You can only find it." He did not understand. "Knowing you will be there tomorrow, Cecilia. It is the only thing that gives me courage." He needed her there to give him the strength to chase a woman who could never give him the very feeling she had taught him to value. The tragic irony was complete. And like a fool, in the name of a love he would never see, she would be there. The Midsummer Gala at Ashworth Manor was the pinnacle of the county's social season. The great house, Cecilia's home, was ablaze with light. Hundreds of candles glittered in the chandeliers, their glow spilling out from the open doors onto the manicured lawns. The air was thick with the scent of roses and expensive French perfume, mingling with the summery smell of cut grass. A string orchestra played elegant waltzes, a sound of London civility in the heart of the quiet countryside. Cecilia stood with her father, greeting guests, a perfect hostess in a gown of deep, understated sapphire blue. But her eyes kept drifting, searching for Edward. When he arrived, looking uncommonly handsome in his formal attire, her heart gave a painful lurch. He was nervous. She could see it in the tightness of his jaw. But his gaze found hers across the crowded room, and he gave her a small, grateful nod, a silent message: "I am here because you are." She watched him go to Lady Isabella, who was a vision in shimmering champagne silk. She saw him bow, saw the practiced smile on his face. Isabella granted him a dance. As he led her onto the floor, Cecilia felt a profound sense of dislocation. He moved with the confidence she had taught him, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. He was performing, and now he knew it too. He was chasing admiration, not the quiet comfort she had described. Cecilia had to turn away. It was at that moment that a new voice, low and laced with a confident charm, spoke beside her. "A hostess should not look so melancholic at her own celebration, Lady Cecilia." She turned to face the Duke of Blackwood, a recent and much discussed arrival in the county, with a reputation for breaking hearts on 2 continents. He was tall, with dark, knowing eyes that seemed to see more than one ought. "Your Grace?" she said, offering a polite curtsy. "And are you enjoying yourself?" he asked, his gaze direct, missing nothing of the sadness she was trying to hide. He engaged her in a conversation that was surprisingly sharp and intelligent. When he asked her to dance, she found she had no polite reason to refuse. As he led her onto the floor, she was acutely aware of Edward. She felt his eyes on them. Out of the corner of her own, she saw his smile falter as he made conversation with Isabella. She saw his gaze follow them as the Duke spun her in a perfect, elegant turn. She saw his jaw tighten. Edward did see them. He saw the most notorious rake in the English aristocracy, holding Cecilia's hand, his dark head bent close to hers as he murmured something that made her laugh. A genuine, surprised laugh that Edward hadn't heard from her in weeks. He felt a sharp, ugly jolt in his gut. It was a feeling of raw, primal possession, and it stunned him with its intensity. His first thought was not of friendship, but the immediate, visceral reaction was quickly followed by a rationalization. Concern. This was the man he had to protect her from. Blackwood could never offer her the things she had described. The safety, the quietness, the comfort. He would only bring her heartbreak. It was his duty, as her friend, to make sure she was safe. The explanation settled over the raw feeling. A cloak of righteous, brotherly responsibility, but the tightness in his jaw remained. After her dance with the Duke, Cecilia, flustered and needing a moment to herself, slipped out onto a stone terrace overlooking the gardens. The cool night air was a welcome relief. She stood behind a large marble urn, listening to the distant strains of the orchestra, when she heard voices approaching from the other side. It was Lady Isabella and another young woman. "The Duke seems quite taken with Lady Cecilia," the friend said, a note of envy in her voice. Isabella laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "He is welcome to her. The girl is pleasant enough, I suppose, but as dull as rainwater. Now her friend the Baron." "He seems quite taken with you," the friend replied. "He is a sweet man, I suppose." Isabella's voice was pure, distilled ambition. "And Ashbourne Park is one of the finest estates in the county. But my goodness, he is so terribly earnest." She paused, and her next words were delivered with a sigh of mock weariness. "He was telling me with the utmost sincerity about his new methods of crop rotation." "Crop rotation?" I had to feign a coughing fit just to escape. Her friend giggled. "But he is a baron, Isabella." "Oh, indeed, his title is impeccable, and his fortune is more than adequate. One simply has to endure the tiresome sincerity of the man attached to them." The words struck Cecilia with the force of a physical blow. The cold stone in her stomach turned to ice, spreading through her entire body. All her pain, her sacrifice, her carefully hidden heartbreak, it had all been in service of this, to help the man she loved give his heart to a woman who saw his greatest virtues as tiresome flaws. The music from the ballroom, her own party, seemed to fade into a dull, meaningless hum. The laughter and candlelight felt a world away. In that moment, standing alone in the darkness, Cecilia felt something inside her finally, irrevocably, break. The breaking was not a loud, dramatic event. It was a quiet, internal crumbling. In the days following the Midsummer Gala, a subtle but profound shift occurred. Cecilia retreated. She no longer spent her days at Ashbourne Park. She remained at her own home, Ashworth Manor, sending polite notes of refusal when Edward invited her to ride or read. The easy, open door to her counsel, the one he had walked through his entire life without a second thought, was now closed and bolted. She did not do it out of malice. It was a matter of survival. To continue helping him pursue a woman who so clearly disdained his very essence was a form of self-destruction she could no longer endure. Every piece of advice she had given him now felt like a betrayal of the man she knew him to be, the man she loved. So she withdrew, her constant, steady presence at his side replaced by a polite, aching void. Meanwhile, the Duke of Blackwood, undeterred by county gossip, began a proper courtship. He sent arrangements of exotic flowers from his London hothouses that put Edward's simple bouquets for Isabella to shame. He called at Ashworth Manor, his carriage a frequent and notable presence on the road between the two estates. Society began to whisper, to speculate. It was a fine match on paper, a duke and a baron's daughter. Edward heard the whispers, and they fueled a restless, irritable fire within him. His world felt wrong, off-kilter. He missed Cecilia with an intensity that baffled him. He'd walk into the library expecting to find her there, a book in her lap, ready to listen, only to find the room empty, the silence heavy and unfamiliar. The house, which had always felt like a home precisely because she was in it, began to feel like a collection of empty, echoing rooms. His own courtship of Lady Isabella felt flat and joyless without Cecilia's encouragement to give it life. His mind kept replaying Cecilia's definition of love, a definition that his courtship with Isabella failed to meet on every count. His growing unease finally boiled over when he saw the Duke's carriage leaving the drive of Ashworth Manor one afternoon. He rode over on impulse, his pretext a question about a shared property line. He found Cecilia in the rose garden, her hands ungloved as she tended to her late mother's flowers. She looked pale, he thought, and there were new shadows beneath her eyes. "Cecilia," he began, his voice stiffer than he intended. "Edward, is something amiss?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. "I saw Blackwood leaving," he said, unable to stop the words. His visits are becoming quite frequent. She straightened up, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. He is a guest in my father's house. He is a rake, Edward countered, his voice rising slightly, infused with a hypocrisy he couldn't see. He cannot offer you what you deserve, what you yourself described. Comfort, safety. He will trifle with your affections and then he will leave. I cannot stand by and see you hurt. The words, meant to sound like brotherly protection, struck her like a slap. He was using the secret language of her heart, the very description of her love for him as a weapon against her. He had no idea the only man hurting her was him. My heart is my own to risk, Edward, she said, her voice quiet but trembling with a strength he had never heard before. And my affections are my own to give. You are my friend, not my keeper. The respectful distance she placed between them was a wall he could not breach. The conversation was over. He left Ashworth Manor feeling strangely defeated, his righteous concern curdling into a confusion he could not name. The friction between them was now a painful, gaping chasm. For Cecilia, that conversation was the final straw. She could not stay here, trapped between the man she loved and the man who was pursuing her, with Edward watching from the sidelines, appointing himself her guardian. The pain was too much. She had to leave. Truly leave. That night, in her own room, she made her decision. With shaking hands, she penned a letter to an aunt in London. Then she sat at her writing desk and wrote a second letter. This one to Edward. It was not a letter of anger or accusation. It was a letter of farewell, a quiet, dignified retreat from his life. My dearest Edward, she began, my father feels it is time for me to spend a season away from home, and after much consideration, I have agreed. I will be traveling to the continent with my aunt, and do not know when I shall return. The lies were unnecessary kindness. She wrote of her deep and abiding friendship, of the honor it had been to grow up beside him. Every word was a dagger in her own heart. When she had finished, she folded the letter, her tears finally falling, spotting the crisp paper. She sealed it and sent it with a footman to Ashbourne Park the next morning. Edward was in his study when the letter arrived. He broke the seal, a sense of cold dread washing over him. He unfolded the paper and read the first, devastating line. My dearest Edward, my father feels it is time for me to spend a season away from home. He read no further. The words swam before his eyes. Traveling? To the continent? For an unknown time? The polite social excuse did nothing to mask the truth. She was leaving him. The letter slipped from his grasp, fluttering to the floor. The carefully constructed world of Baron Edward Montgomery, a world he had only just begun to realize was built entirely on the foundation of her presence, shattered into a million pieces. His expression, in the quiet morning light, broke completely. The silence of the house was a roaring in his ears. He stared at the letter on the floor, the polite, distant words feeling like a judgment. She was leaving. It was a possibility he had never, in 32 years, contemplated. Cecilia was as much a part of Ashbourne as the ancient oaks that lined the drive, as the sturdy stone of its walls. The thought of his life without her was the thought of a body without a soul. A frantic, desperate energy seized him. He did not send a reply. He went himself. He rode to Ashworth Manor as if the devil were on his heels, his mind a chaotic whirl of panic and confusion. He found her not in a drawing room, but in the one place he knew she might be. Their place. The Widow's Walk atop Ashbourne, a place she had a key to and had always treated as her own. She had come for one last look. He threw open the heavy door to the roof, and there she was, a solitary figure wrapped in a light cloak, staring out at the rolling, misty hills. She turned as she heard his frantic steps, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and sorrow. She had not expected him to come. "You are leaving," he said. It was not a question, but a statement of raw, wounded disbelief. His voice was ragged. "Edward, she began, but the words caught in her throat. He strode toward her, the letter clutched in his hand, his composure gone, stripped away to reveal the raw, terrified man beneath the title. "Why?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "Your letter speaks of travel, of your father's wishes, but that is not the reason, not the true one." Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering in the light. "My life has been a joy," she whispered. "You know that." "Then why?" he pressed, stepping closer, his desperation growing with every beat of silence between them. "Why does it feel like I am losing you?" And with that question, the last of her defenses crumbled. The dam of a lifetime of unspoken love, of selfless sacrifice and quiet pain, finally broke. The dignity that had been her shield, her armor, fell away. "Because you already have," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "You lost me the day you asked me to help you win another woman." He stared at her, uncomprehending. "What has that to do with anything? I needed your help. You are my closest friend." "Yes," she said, and a single hot tear traced a path down her cheek. "I am. And I have stood by you, and I have helped you, and I have smiled while my own heart was breaking. I taught you how to waltz, knowing I would never be the one in your arms. I helped you write letters with words I have longed my entire life to hear. I cannot do it any more, Edward." Her voice broke on a sob she could not contain. "My heart, it has always been yours. And to stand by and watch you give it away is a pain I can no longer endure. I must leave to save what is left of myself." Her words were a confession of love, not an accusation against another. The confession hung in the cool air, stark and pure. It was as if a bolt of lightning had illuminated the entire landscape of his life, and at the center of the brilliant flash was the memory of her voice in the library, describing a love he did not understand. It is a quietness, a feeling of safety, a feeling of coming home. His mind raced, connecting the pieces. He saw her offering him an apple, her fierce loyalty a shield. He saw her face alight with wonder as she traced the stars. He felt the easy, perfect rightness of her in his arms as they'd waltzed. He thought of his frantic, possessive jealousy over the Duke. And he finally understood. The comfort, the safety, the feeling of being utterly and completely seen. He had been searching for it in Isabella, when he had possessed it with Cecilia his entire life. He thought of Isabella's cruel words. He saw her shallowness with blinding clarity. He had been chasing a reflection in a looking-glass while the sun was at his back the entire time. He had been a fool. The constant, steady presence in his life was not friendship. It had been love, and his fear of her being with the Duke wasn't brotherly concern. It was jealousy, pure, agonizing jealousy. "The Duke," he breathed, the word a revelation. "I told myself I was protecting you, that he couldn't offer you the comfort you deserved." He looked at her, his eyes full of a new, dawning clarity. What a liar I was. I wasn't measuring him against you. I was measuring him against me. The truth is, I couldn't bear the thought of any man standing where I should have been. I wasn't protecting you as a brother. I was hiding from the truth that I loved you as a man. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just his friend, but Cecilia, the woman who had cried when his favorite hound had died, who knew which books he would love before he read them, who saw not the Baron, but the man, the woman whose absence, for a mere few weeks, had made his entire world feel empty and wrong. "All this time," he whispered, the words full of a wonder and a profound aching regret. "The feeling you described. The safety, the quiet, the coming home. It was you. It was always you." He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek, his thumb stroking away a tear. It was a gesture of infinite tenderness, an answer to a question she had been asking in her heart for years. He closed the small space between them, and his lips met hers. The kiss was not one of passion or frantic desperation. It was a kiss of homecoming. It was tender, deliberate, a silent apology for his blindness, and a solemn vow for the future. It was the release of years of unspoken longing. The quiet, certain beginning of a love that had, against all odds, finally been seen. He broke the kiss, but kept her close, his forehead resting against hers, the cool country air forgotten in the warmth that now enveloped them. He knew there were things to be done, a courteous, final break with a woman who had never known his heart, explanations to be made, a future to be built. But for now, in the silent witness of the stars they had once charted together, all that mattered was the woman in his arms, her tears of sorrow finally turning into tears of joy. He had asked her to help him win another, but it was her love he chose, at last. All those years, he was only chasing shadows.